Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Chris Anker, Vice President of Marketing and Outreach for the Common Ground Alliance. Here in rainy Florida, I am live at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, Apollo Saturn V Center. And we are thrilled today to be here with our member Orbital Sidekick discussing the launch of the new damage prevention technology. And what you're seeing out there in the distance is Launchpad 40, a lot of rain and a lot of palm trees. But we're destined for new adventures here at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. And here to walk that through with you today is CGA President CEO Sarah Magruder-Lyle, joined by Dan Katz, CEO and President of Orbital Sidekick. Take it away, guys.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Sarah Magruder-Lyle, President and CEO of the Common Ground Alliance, and I am here with Dan Katz, who is the CEO and co-founder of Orbital Sidekick. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here today, and it's really exciting too. We're here in the background. We've got a Saturn V rocket. It's pretty impressive. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Dan, tell me a little bit about how you got into this space and about Orbital Sidekick.
Yeah, my pleasure. So we started Orbital Sidekick back in 2016 with a pretty, I think, ambitious mission of using small satellite platforms to provide a global persistent monitoring service to the energy sector. And we really targeted at first with focusing on oil and gas pipeline monitoring. And what we can do with our satellites really is we can provide a persistent, objective monitoring capability to our customers. We provide daily pipeline monitoring of all of our customer assets.
Wow, that's really interesting. So tell me a little bit about the technology that you're using to do that monitoring.
Sure. Well, it starts with not just the satellites that we're using, which again provide that high revisit rate and be able to provide daily monitoring. But we also use something called hyperspectral imagery. Hyperspectral imagery is a really fascinating technology. It's been around for a while, but it hasn't been so recently with our company that we're implementing it at scale. What hyperspectral really is, I first like to talk about what it's not actually. Hyperspectral, it's not like the camera that's on your iPhone, which is capturing images in the visual range of the electromagnetic spectrum. So you're just looking at red, green, and blue color bands, and that's all you're seeing. With hyperspectral, what we're doing, we're capturing hundreds of really narrow color bands in the visible through shortwave infrared light regions. So what we can do is we can pick up the very unique chemical signatures of each object in our data set. So everything reflects light and absorbs light in a unique manner, and that shows up in a spectral profile. And so hyperspectral imagery can identify those unique signatures. So for the petrochemical industry, for oil and gas pipeline monitoring, if we're looking for contamination signatures, our technology can identify those signatures. So not just kind of direct detection of oil on a right-of-way, but even underground leaks as it changes the properties of the surrounding environment. So it's really good for right-of-way monitoring, looking at change detection, looking at threats to a pipeline right-of-way, looking at construction activity. So hyperspectral imagery is a great way to perform objective, very, very high fidelity monitoring of our customer assets.
So it's not a penetrating platform, but it actually can, because of whatever's happening underground is trickling upwards to the surface, it picks up those small different chemical signatures?
Correct. Yeah. So for instance, a kind of clean soil, topsoil will have a specific reflectance property and signature that we can see, whereas for contaminated soil, you're going to have a different signature that you'll see on the surface. So and we can also look at changes in vegetative signatures. So if vegetation is influenced by, it's contaminated by an underground natural gas leak, it's going to present itself in the reflectance signatures of that vegetation. So yes, it's not penetrating per se, but they're it's very likely that a surface level indicator will be present that our technology will be able to identify.
Got it. So Orbital Sidekick joined CGA as a corporate member last year, and one of the reasons was because we're very like-minded on damage prevention. So tell me why that part of this is important to you, to your company.
Well, yeah, I think a big part of what we do as a company is promote safety and sustainability, and I think that meshes obviously incredibly well with CGA's mission. So we're very happy to continue to partner with your organization, and I think that's becoming a very important topic across the energy sector, across any sector really, when you look at sustainable operations and sustainable business practices.
Absolutely. And so, is this the first? So tell us a little bit about the satellite that's going to be launched that we're here for.
Sure. So the satellite that's launching here very shortly, it's called Aurora, and it's our first freestanding satellite. So actually, 3 years ago, almost to the day, we were here at Cape Canaveral launching our first hyperspectral sensor camera, which we installed on the International Space Station. And we were able to collect some really great data with that system. That was kind of our proof of concept, tech demo, validation capability for us. So with Aurora, though, that's launching, again, very shortly here, we are able to provide more persistent monitoring of specific customer assets. So up to weekly monitoring of certain customers of their assets. We're also able to provide a more advanced data set that we're able to analyze. So the hyperspectral camera technology that's on this Aurora satellite is the most advanced hyperspectral system ever deployed on a satellite in the history of mankind. So we're very excited to have this be deployed. And so while it's not going to be, this isn't kind of our full commercialization of what we're building. That's going to come next year in 2022 when we deploy 6 additional satellites in our Ghost constellation. But Aurora, what this is going to enable us is to be able to continue to execute on some initial pilot programs, initial customer contracts, further validate our capabilities, demonstrate our ability to do kind of large-scale methane mapping, to be able to provide large-scale and kind of gross-level change detection for various customers. So we really encourage people to we're really excited to partner with people and different operators who can, and we can validate a lot of our capabilities with this mission.
So tell me about the constellation. So you're going to be sending up more satellites, and how will they all work together?
Right. Well, so we have 6 satellites launching next year, so that'll be 7 total that we'll have. And we're actually already looking at expanding our constellation even further. With each subsequent satellite that we launch and put into orbit, it'll allow us to cover more of the Earth in terms of our ability to provide more frequent revisit rates to monitor our customer assets. So right now we're looking at about weekly monitoring capability with 1 satellite. And by the end of next year, once we have all of our satellites up, for certain customer assets, we'll be able to provide monitoring as frequently as daily. So really, as we continue to build more infrastructure in space, we have more sensors in space, more assets, we'll be able to provide greater persistence, have more capacity for more of our customers, and also expanding our customer base beyond pipeline operators, also looking at other parts of energy infrastructure, looking at downstream, looking at upstream. Exploration is something that we're starting to really get interested in. So there's a lot of interesting ability for us to scale our product offering to really target more customers.
So talk to me a little bit about what you're focusing on as far as analytical capability. How does that translate to the customer?
Yeah. So I think it's really important to point out this step that Orbital Sidekick, we do not sell satellites, and so we don't even consider ourselves really a satellite company. We don't sell hyperspectral data either. So we don't collect all this hyperspectral data and just hand it off to a customer and say, here, you figure out what this all means. Right? We have a room full of PhDs who are very smart data scientists who know what they're doing and how to extract actionable information from this hyperspectral data. So what we actually provide is a monitoring service. And so that's how we like to consider ourselves. We're a monitoring service company. So the analytics that we build are really based on some very advanced AI, ML, neural network capability of extracting actionable information from these hyperspectral data sets and then delivering that information to the end users who are all the pipeline operators and other energy companies we're working with. Now, the platform we use is called Sigma, which is our Spectral Intelligence Global Monitoring Application. It's a bit of a mouthful, so we call it Sigma. But what Sigma is our web-based user platform. And so it allows operators to log in and see actionable information in near real time about their asset. And it's compliant with regulatory guidelines, with PHMSA compliance. That's a really big key for us, right? Also working to provide next level change detection capability, and we work with our customers as well. And that's actually one thing that we're encouraging for people to sign up with pilot programs, initial contracts. As an early customer, you can help shape some of our product development over the next couple of years. So you've got to get in on the ground floor, and we'll work with you to deliver the best product possible for you as a monitoring service.
So you are going to send Aurora up soon.
Yep.
And then 6 more in 2022.
Correct.
Will you be sending more up after that, or will that be the complete Ghost constellation? What's the future look like for the setup?
So the Ghost constellation of 6 satellites for next year, those are being built right now as we speak, right? And we have launches booked for them next year. What we're currently working on right now is the next generation after Ghost. So satellites 7 through 15 or 20. As we continue to gain more interest from customers, we also have interest from our government partners as well in the Defense Department. We're looking at expanding our capabilities and growing our constellation further.
That's amazing. So, I know you have a background in the pipeline energy sector, as do I. And, one of the focuses that a lot of companies have are, the environmental, social, and corporate governance responsibilities that these companies have to the communities in which they serve and in which they operate. So tell me a little bit about how OSK's technology can help companies, how they approach this part of their mission.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, sustainability is a big part of our core value system here at Orbital Sidekick. And I think there's kind of the obvious one, which is if we're monitoring oil and gas pipelines and helping to prevent leaks or detect leaks as early as possible, that's certainly part of our collective responsibility as good stewards and of energy infrastructure and having sustainable operations. So that's kind of one aspect of it. And you can extrapolate that to upstream and downstream and really any kind of infrastructure monitoring. We're also looking at mining operations and sustainable mining operations and a few other things there too. So we have, it's really, but another really interesting thing, and I know that CGA is involved in this as well, looking at electric utility lines and power lines. And that's something that Aurora, we're really excited about deploying the second half of this year once Aurora is launched, is the ability to monitor high wildfire risk areas using Aurora's monitoring capability. So, we're based in San Francisco, in California, which, so selfishly, I'm very concerned about wildfire risk in my home state. So with Aurora, being able to monitor large swaths of California to identify the high fire risk areas and be able to work with utility companies and also fire agencies, both on a local, regional, and national level, to help identify high risk areas so that we can really advocate for sustainable operations and help reduce the risk of wildfires.
So obviously, if there's a leak in a pipeline, right, there's a certain chemical structure you're looking for there in this technology. What does a high risk? What do you look for to determine what a high risk fire area is?
Sure. So I mentioned briefly before about our ability to monitor vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
So vegetation along a pipeline right of way, you're looking for various signatures that may indicate that there's an underground leak that could stress or kill the vegetation. So in a similar manner with wildfire risk monitoring, we're looking at various indices and various indicators in the vegetation. So looking at there are certain tree species that are more susceptible to fire, and of course we're looking at moisture contents, disease, stress, all of these different factors. Kind of combine that all together in a very high fidelity model that our analysts work on and have developed, and then you can basically provide a map, say that says this is the highest risk area. So it's impossible for someone like PG&E to constantly monitor their hundreds of thousands of miles of power lines on a persistent daily basis. So we need to be able to work with them to identify the highest risk areas so they can allocate their resources more effectively and efficiently.
So with that, even when it comes to monitoring pipelines or power lines, right? Mm-hmm. Flyovers are something that are used a lot, and now drones. Mm-hmm. What's the benefit of having an Aurora do this versus drones?
Right. Well, it's kind of, there's a couple ways to look at it. And first off, with drones or aircraft, the reality is, again, if you have hundreds of thousands of miles of utility lines, it's just not practical to have all of those drones and all of those aircraft consistently and persistently flying over. For the satellites, with one satellite, I can monitor California on a weekly basis. And it's just 6 more, I can do it on a daily basis. So it's much more practical to provide that persistent monitoring capability for a satellite. Now, are we going to have the highest resolution that a drone is going to have? No, but if I can help, again, that's part of that, making sure that we can effectively identify the high-risk areas, and then we can allocate resources more effectively. So I can tell a drone where to go and where to do their more robust monitoring from there. So kind of think of it as like a system of systems. So the spacecraft is your global persistent monitoring capability, mm-hmm. and then you have aircraft, and then you have foot patrol underneath, and they all work together.
Right. Very good. So when we're talking about, these various types of technologies, and one of the things that we've been talking about at Common Ground Alliance is moving damage prevention forward into the next generation with our Next Practices initiative. And what do we do to incentivize the next generation of technology like yours? So what really, you talked about how you got here, but what was the thing that made you say, I'm going to do this? What was the tipping point for you?
Well, I love space, so that was a big thing to get this company started. And my co-founder has worked with some energy companies as well. So when we started the company, we really wanted to see how we could leverage satellite platforms to help the energy sector. And so as we continued our kind of pursuit about how we can match our technology and our platform user and attacking a problem that's persistent within the sector, that's when we really kept coming back to pipeline monitoring. And so it just makes sense for us to go and partner with the organizations that have the biggest pull, that have the biggest influence. So working with CGA, working with other, working with the iPipe group as well with this mission as well. So we have, it really just makes sense for us to do what we can with the technology we have. It's kind of a perfect fit. It makes sense that we have, again, this global persistent monitoring platform with a technology that can chemically fingerprint every object in our data set. It's like, why not have this marriage between our company and pipeline operators? So it's a no-brainer.
Well, I know that Common Ground Alliance is thrilled that OSK is going to be doing a technology presentation at our conference in Orlando, October 12th through the 15th. And with your focus on the energy sector, are there other places you're going to talk about this really amazing technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to name a few, I think I might miss some, but we know we're presenting at API, AGA, oil sands, and gas tech in Dubai in September. So, very got a kind of a full plate ahead of us this year. So you'll probably be seeing us a lot. But yeah, really excited about how things are progressing.
That's amazing. So, what are the other potential applications for this beyond the energy sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. The other kind of big part I would say right now for our business is on the defense side of things. And actually, I think it's a really kind of speaks volumes to what we're doing and how we're building our data security is really important. I think I hope that a lot of our pipeline operators and other folks in the energy sector can see what we're doing with the defense sector, who recognize the value of the data that they can get from our satellites. And the architecture we've developed is the same way we deliver data to our defense customers and the intelligence community. It's the same way we deliver data to the energy sector. And there's a lot of tie over between those two sectors. So defense is a big part of what we do, other than energy. And then, as I mentioned before, mining is an area that we're starting to make inroads into. And hyperspectral has traditionally been used for things like agriculture. It's not something we've really dabbled too much in yet, but it could be on the roadmap. But I also want to make it very abundantly clear that we are full steam ahead on pipeline operators as our core product focus today, and we're really excited about expanding within energy.
Tell me a little bit about the iPipe Consortium and how they got together.
Oh, well, so the iPipe Consortium is a group of some of the largest pipeline operators in North America, working through the North Dakota state government in order to provide more sustainable operations and better safety monitoring capabilities for pipeline operators, specifically in the Bakken area, but a lot of them are in Permian as well. So we joined the program. So the iPipe has a technology scouting program that we joined in 2019, and Aurora is a big part of that. We're servicing a lot of their a lot of the operators and members of iPipe with Aurora and monitoring their collective infrastructure in both the Bakken and the Permian.
Wow, that's really amazing. So, pipelines are certainly, the least carbon, intensive way to move, product, oil, gas, CO2, whatever it is. So this technology will significantly help reduce the risk of some sort of uncontrolled incident, some sort of disturbance, and being able to detect that sooner rather than later is a great benefit to your customers and to many the communities in which they're in. How much of a role did the potential impact of these kinds of things have on the communities, have on how you approach this from like the environmental impact side of this?
Well, I mean, this is a win-win for everyone, right? We all want to have more sustainable operations. No one wants to have a leak. No one wins, right? So it's clearly in the best interest of everyone for us to help have more sustainable operations. I know this issue hit home for me, particularly growing up in San Francisco Bay Area with the San Bruno pipeline explosion with PG&E back in 2010, 2012. And that affected me personally, and I know that a lot of other people have been affected personally by things like this too. But of course, I think everyone, as you mentioned before, all the corporate structures are having there's an ESG group now, and there's a full focus on sustainability, and I think this is a great way to make an impact and a very immediate impact in how we can better our monitoring technology to help reduce incidents.
In a lot of this technology, so we are about preventing damage to underground infrastructure. A lot of what OSK is doing is the ability to monitor what's just happening there. Maybe a line gets a nick while they're doing something and nothing happens. It seems fine, but being able to detect things that we're not looking at underground, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right, whether it's identifying construction activity that a pilot might miss on their once every 2 week flyover, to identify an area that could have been hit, or just an early small leak that's slowly seeping into the surrounding environment. These are things that Orbital Sidekick is really well geared to help monitor.
Great. So tell me a little bit about, what was it like to start this company? What did people say to you and you said, this is what I want to do?
Well, it's so again, I'm from San Francisco, and so is my co-founder is actually from India, but he moved to San Francisco a few decades ago. So we're kind of in the cradle of innovation here, right, in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And we had both worked at a company called Space Systems Morale, which is an aerospace company, and we were right across the street from Google and Facebook and all of these really innovative companies that are helping solve some big problems. Obviously, there's some other challenges there too, but for the most part, though, you've got a lot of innovation happening there, and I think that pushes people in the area and to kind of think about how we can think a little bit outside the box, to be disruptive in certain industries and sectors that I think could use a bit of a push. And obviously, we're not trying to say that we know how to do things better than the people in the industry, but an outsider perspective, I think, can be refreshing, can be helpful, especially when we can come here and partner with the incumbent groups that have been doing this for a while and working a hybrid approach of how we can take our technology to help address a very real and kind of entrenched problem.
And that's what innovation is, right? Taking what other people have worked on and continuing to improve it.
Yeah.
So how does it feel to be here knowing that Aurora is going to go up?
It's pretty fantastic because it's been a long journey. As I said before, 3 years ago is when we launched our last camera system to the space station from this very site. Through COVID delays and other things with this mission, it's been a long journey. And I know my team, a large portion of our company is actually out here today and this week to watch the launch. And we're just so excited. And really excited for our customers too, because we know they've been so helpful and working with us to help because they recognize the potential of this product and what we're doing. They've been so patient and flexible with us as we've put in the hard work to get this satellite ready for launch and get things moving. And so it's a thrill to be here.
Great, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us. Best of luck on the launch.
Thank you so much.
We look
Thanks
forward
so
to
much for
continuing
having
to work with you.
All right, so I'm back, and we do have a couple questions. So I'm going to start with one we have from Pennsylvania, one call. Next question. What would monitoring a state weekly cost for a pipeline? We have about 120,000 miles of gathering lines and nearly 75,000 transmission and 50,000 of distribution.
Wow, that's a great question. So right now we're working, under the assumption that we don't want to charge you, very much more than what you're currently paying for aerial operations. So we're not trying to charge you an arm and a leg over what you're used to paying and what's in your existing budget line item. And I think that's a really appealing thing, right? We pipeline operators, they've got their PHMSA compliance budget items for routine aerial patrol, and certainly for utility lines as well. So our pricing model is very competitive with current aerial surveillance technologies.
Well, and something else we've been talking about is cost versus value, right? What is that upfront cost versus the long-term value of what you're getting, right? So the ability to see this weekly, daily, versus with a a technology versus just drone or flyover, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah. So right, if you're performing, we can provide daily monitoring of your assets. It's going to have a much better return for you than having, once every 2 weeks or once a month have a pilot fly over and stick their head out the window. That is orders of magnitude better value for your dollar.
Great question. Thanks so much. Another question we had is, what is the size of the satellite? Can you give us some scale?
Yeah, it's about that big. No, it's the satellites themselves. This is actually the really cool part about the space industry right now. Commercial space industry is kind of completely flipped on its head. It's the cost to launch satellites into space has decreased 100-fold over the last 10 years. But the technology that we utilize for both the hyperspectral imagery and the onboard computing and all those systems have been miniaturized. Just kind of like Moore's law, right? Everything's becoming miniaturized. So our satellites are about the size of a dorm room fridge. If that kind of gives you an idea, right? They weigh about. Aurora's a bit smaller, but the ones next year are about the size of a dorm room fridge, and weigh about 200 pounds.
So this is more of content here, but folks were asking what is in the backdrop. What are we looking at here?
Yeah. So this gigantic rocket here. This is the Saturn V rocket that took the Apollo astronauts to the moon. I just was told that. I mean, obviously, this one did not go to the moon, but this was a backup rocket that was put in place in case anything went wrong and they could launch a rescue mission at a moment's notice. So that's what you're looking at. That massive Saturn V rocket, and that's specifically kind of in the background there. I think you can see the second stage engine. On farther that way are the 5 main engines that are. I can stand. We could probably stack ourselves on top of each other and fit inside one of those engines. It's pretty impressive.
It would be quite a panoramic picture to get the whole thing in the shot.
Yeah. So I think it's about the length of a football field too.
Anticipated time when you expect to have like your first set of analysis and your first report or update for the industry on after the launch?
That's a great question. So once we launch, we'll have to kind of test out the satellite, commission the satellite. So that'll take a couple weeks, depending on how quickly we can, how well things are going. So we expect to have, start working on operations for our pilot programs, things like with iPipe, by the end of July.
Awesome. Back here we've got. Well, I think we have completed the questions in the Q&A. So thank you for taking the time to run through those today. So Sarah, do you want to sign us off here?
Great. Thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at the launch. And thanks again to Dan and Orbital Sidekick, and look forward to staying in touch.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.